Hello and welcome to First Tuesdays. First Tuesdays is a webinar that's offered by the Washington State Library, and I just have a little bit of business to take care of before we turn you over to the main attraction. So first of all, I'm your facilitator. My name is Nona Burling. Here's my contact information. For technical support today, we have Jeremy Stroud. Jeremy, would you mind putting your contact information into the chat box so that if anyone needs help, they can contact you? And let's see here. Go to my next slide. This is the First Tuesday is brought to you by the Washington State Library, which is part of the Office of Secretary of State. And our funder is the Institute of Museum and Library Services through the LSTA Act. So we're very grateful to them. And let me say that when you close down this window at the end of it, you will have in your browser a survey that's a very quick 4-question survey. And part of our, I'm not saying this clearly. The questions are for our annual report for the Institute of Museum and Library Services. So we'd really appreciate it if you would take the time. It shouldn't take you more than a couple minutes, and they help us with our statistics that we need to report. So today we have a really great presentation, and I'm so grateful that Marcellus has been willing to give us time from his, I'm sure, extremely full schedule. So the topic today is becoming a socially conscious library, and our presenter is Marcellus Turner, who oversees the Seattle Public Library, which includes the world-renowned Central Library and 26 Seattle neighborhood libraries. Turner's been in this position since 2011, and he's enjoyed his role in finding creative solutions and approaches to the exciting, unique, and ever-changing challenges that urban libraries face. Now that's a mouthful and a big topic. Turner is the former executive director of Jefferson County Public Library in Lakewood, Colorado, and he previously worked for libraries in Rockford, Illinois, Tacoma, Washington, Atlantic City, New Jersey, as well as academic libraries in Tennessee and Louisiana. He holds a master's degree in library science from the University of Tennessee. And I'm going to turn this over to Marcellus in just a second, but I checked with him beforehand, and he is happy to answer questions during the presentation. So if he says anything, you need a little bit more information, please type it into the chat box, and I will be monitoring that chat and find a time to break in to pose your question. So take it away, Marcellus.
Thank you so much, Nono. And I wanted to say good morning, and I know that Nono said I had a busy schedule, but I can't imagine that any of us on this presentation this morning doesn't have a busy schedule. So I'm excited to be here and really appreciative that everyone is here with us. Becoming a socially conscious library is something that I have been tinkering with for the last couple of years, as working here at Seattle Public Library has allowed me to look at some of the challenges that we're facing in working with our city and our patrons to address some of the issues the city faces. And it has become such an interest that I think many of my staff tire of me talking about the socially conscious library. But it is a mission, it is a goal, it is something that we're striving for. And I think that as we move through this topic, some of you will find that to be the case as well. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. And let's see. Nono covered everything about me, and I'm not going to add anything more to lengthen that conversation. I do work in an urban library setting, and because of the impact of our spaces and services, we certainly have our interest in and around being a socially conscious library. So I think this is probably the first place to start, which is defining social consciousness. And what do we actually mean when we say that? When I say socially conscious, I'm referencing the shared awareness I expect my staff to have of the ever-changing social impacts we see on our communities and in our libraries. In times past, people would often come to me and say, well, what are the challenges facing libraries? And I'd say, well, outside of funding, the two biggest things that we're facing are convenience and technology. And while those three are still true, I've added a fourth thing that I think has become one of the bigger issues facing libraries today, and that is social issues and how we address them in our libraries. It's a top concern for me, but it's also an interest, so I don't want to mislead you or confuse you when I say it's a concern, because I really do like talking about this and working to make our library a more responsive library system. Many of you likely recognize what I mean when you think of how your libraries have responded to an increase in homelessness, an increase in opioid use, a changing climate, an increase in hate-based harassment, and any number of other issues that change the way our communities behave and interact with one another. So you do recognize the social issues that we face. But I also want to make one important distinction when I use the term socially conscious library. And when I do that, I'm saying that being a socially conscious library is not the same as working to be a socially just library. And I don't want to confuse people, so I'm going to share a bit more. When we talk about socially conscious, we're talking about what happens in our libraries and the issues that present themselves in our physical locations or on our virtual spaces. Those things that we cannot control, the activities and issues that influence and impact our patrons beyond our doors. And but we can make or provide tools that help assist them in their use of the library. We can take actions in ways that are responsive to those patrons, their impacts and influences. Within our buildings, we can work to level the playing field for our patrons, even if we can't even if we can't solve the larger social issues. So being socially conscious requires us to assess where we are as library systems and make the biggest positive impact in response to those outside social influences. So why would libraries do this work? And I should say this also as just an aside, I did this presentation at the Washington Library Association conference this past November. And it was a very engaging opportunity to talk with school libraries, public libraries, and academic libraries. And we all found that we're facing the same social issues, but we're also realizing why we need to do this work or why libraries are responsible for doing some of this work. So when I say, why do we do this work? I think it's a multi-pronged answer. First, the very work that we do gives us a front row seat to the patrons who enter our doors and some idea of the issues and challenges they face navigating our cities and communities. Second, our libraries are well positioned in our community as thought leaders. We are in a unique position to help guide the community conversations that occur around difficult social issues. Our third answer is public trust. We can hold those conversations because we have worked hard throughout our institutional histories to ensure our public trusts us to serve the community thoughtfully and with compassion. Our public recognizes us for what we are, one of the last true democratic institutions that seeks to do right by everyone in our communities. And lastly, it really is our only true option of remaining successful in our primary mission of bringing people, information, and ideas together to enrich lives and build communities. Of course, that's our mission statement, but it does respect what we have as our only true option. As institutions that are open to everyone, it's essential that we understand the root cause reasons why we see shifting behaviors and demographics in our libraries and work to solve those shifts in our spaces and time. So I'll give you just some of the examples that I'm thinking of when I talk about the current social issues that impact libraries across the US. When we finish this list, I think you too will think of some additional ones that you can add to the list, either from direct experience in your local library or as you read about the issues facing libraries and, in fairness, the communities and cities in which we live. So some of the things that we're seeing in our libraries here at Seattle Public are the growing wealth gap and housing affordability crisis. Certainly we have homelessness, and as just in case I confuse you a little bit down the road, we often speak of our homeless or we identify them as daily readers. So if you hear me say that, please know that I'm referencing the homeless population that uses our libraries. Other social issues we see are the opioid addiction. We see mental health issues showing up in our libraries. We certainly experience online in-person harassment that follows some of the isms that occur in society: racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia. Any of those fall into that category as harassment. And then the rising cost of living in Seattle creates insecure housing for many. One of the things I will say about this is that this list will enlarge and shrink dependent upon the communities and the issues they face. So again, what is happening here in Seattle may not necessarily be the same issues that you're facing in your cities. However, I think that you will see them at time, and the degree to how large they are or small will just depend upon your community. And the last thing about this is that they will come and go, because as one social issue is addressed, I think others will come in and take their place. So one of the things I talked about when I was talking about the socially just option that some people think we can take on is that social justice refers to righting some wrongs of the past that the library may not necessarily have been involved in or may not necessarily have the resources to address. However, there are some tools within our control that we do have the ability to address and make for better circumstances around social issues. Some of those things include, well, let me say one more thing. So this is what I want to talk about now. We've talked about the what and why of being socially conscious, but how and where we can apply this principle shows up within the tools within our control. How can we lead our organizations through scenarios that call upon our social consciousness and apply solutions that make positive impact in our communities? So here's a list of some of the things that you have at your disposal in your own particular libraries that you can look at again to figure out, are they making the most welcoming opportunity for our social issues that present in our libraries, and would, by our looking at it, make us more socially conscious? Here at SPL, the things that we're looking at is our mission statement the most welcoming? Do our policies and procedures reflect what we need to do to make everyone welcome to use our libraries? Budget. Budgets are something that I'll talk a little bit further about as we move down the road, but certainly our budgets are challenges to address social issues as well, but an opportunity. The programs and services that we offer, our physical and digital facilities and spaces, the staff trainings that we do in our libraries, community partnerships, agency to agency partnerships, communications and public information. How do we share what we're doing? Our staffing models, our work groups and committees, outreach and engagement, advocacy, even access to collections and technology falls within the tools within our control. But I'm sure as I was creating this list, there were more that I was leaving out, and I would encourage you to think about what other tools are within your control to address. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about quickly is to show you what our strategic direction looks like, because this is where it starts with what we can do to address social issues. One of these tools, and in our case we call it the strategic direction, could be your strategic plan. It's your roadmap for your staff and the public to clearly understand your institutional priorities and values. As we navigate the challenging or sticky moments as a system, our 3-year strategic direction here at SPL provides clarity. Now, just as a sidebar, I will tell you a little bit about why we call it a direction and why it is 3 years as opposed to a 5-year traditional strategic plan that most places see. We rolled this strategic direction out 3 years ago, 2 years ago actually, 2019 is the last year, and we did it for several reasons. One of the first is that most times when you hear strategic plan, you think of something very formidable, very final, very definite, and very solid. And that means that you must adhere to it for that full length of time. We chose the word direction because we wanted to be a bit flexible and nimble should we need to change direction in any particular place. The other thing about our strategic direction is that it is a 3-year direction, and we did that intentionally as well, mainly because 5 years is a long time to wait until you can make changes. And so we wanted something that allowed us the flexibility to change within 3 years what we were working on and what we were doing. So that's why we call it a strategic direction, and that's why it's 3 years. There's one last thing too. In 2019, our current levy expires, and we also wanted to be conscious of the fact that should we not have funding sources in 2020, we did not create a strategic direction that committed us to things that we might have to change along the way. A couple of other things that I'll show you quickly about our strategic direction is that it's divided into 3 parts. What we can do for the individual, which is purple, what we can do for the community is which is green, and what we can do for the institution, which is the orange. And the business model is where we as a library system can make changes to ensure that our public spaces are welcoming to everyone. We'll talk mostly out of that component of the strategic direction, but we'll also pick up some things out of the program of service, which is intended for the individual. So as you can see here in the orange section of the business model, we've implemented a race and social justice focus, meaning we are working hard as a system to apply equitable practices in all that we do, whether it be policy development, program design, collection development, or capital improvement planning. Now, one thing I will point out here too is that you will see the word justice in this title. This Race and Social Justice is an initiative of the City of Seattle, and all city departments are required to participate in it. So that is why you see the word justice as opposed to race and social consciousness. Even so, we can work with that. In the purple section, which is the program of service and what we do for the individual, you'll see that access is a top priority, which helps remind us that we believe the power of knowledge is for everyone in every walk of life, no matter their life situation, to have access. You'll also see in our areas of impact, community engagement, and that's a key priority for us as well. If we're not routinely and actively and sincerely engaging with our community to understand their needs and how we can be of service to them, our goals will not be met. This strategic direction is just one tool we're using to help guide us through changing social dynamics, but it's the start of how we do our work. So, one of the things that didn't show up on the list, but is one of the things that we work with is staff and board involvement, or at least the staff part did show up, but the board involvement did not show up. To succeed in implementing this big idea successfully, I believe strongly that this work requires having everyone at the table and on the same page about how we move forward together. It involves working closely with our Board of Trustees to be sure they understand the challenges our staff are up against so that they can advocate effectively on our behalf. It requires creating a common understanding about our value system as a workplace. In our case, we've developed a set of internal organizational values, our IOVs, that help us understand how we work together to achieve our common mission. We'll be undergoing a full review of those in the near future to make sure they align with our public-facing goals. It also requires empowering our staff to make smart decisions on the fly, and I'll give you an example of that. Last year during March, when there was the Women's March, we had a parade through downtown, or the march through downtown Seattle. And there were hundreds of thousands of women marching down 4th Avenue, which is the street that the library is located. And it became a rest stop, as you might imagine, for the many people who were walking through the city. As people started coming into the library for the rest stop, we started seeing long lines at all of our women's restrooms in the buildings and very few long lines at the men's restrooms. Staff worked quickly with security to convert the majority of our restrooms to women's restrooms and guided men to dedicated restrooms for them. Several staff remarked that it was the most deft and professional example of crowd control they'd ever seen. And it was a proud moment for all of us to be able to show how we can quickly and on our feet shift our services to meet our community's changing needs, even if that need was only for one day. So that's an opportunity of being socially conscious. But we also empower our staff by developing cross-divisional staff committees that give everyone a chance to be at the decision-making tables across our system. Our Race and Social Justice Change Team works throughout the system to analyze and implement our equitable practices. Our Committee for Outreach, Programming, and Engagement, COPE, helps set the pace and tones of the way we engage with community. And our Workplace Environment Committee helps guide us in creating and sustaining a healthy work environment in alignment with our internal values. A minute ago, I also referenced the budget and how the budget can sometimes present challenges to creating a socially just environment, but it can also create some challenges for social consciousness, but creativity allows us to do some things that support us in this effort. As I'm sure is true in your libraries, most of our budget dollars are spent in fixed or predetermined ways, which means personnel, building maintenance, collection maintenance, technology, those types of things that we must give monies to. They are the necessary cost of running the library system. Budget limitations are another reason we can't, as a public institution, solve the social issues that exist beyond our doors. So it is within these buckets of money that we do have that we must look for our opportunities. So the social options that we put forward now come from how we manage our budget. So some of the ways that we've reallocated our dollars within those budget items include adding staffing capacity where we can. In some cases, this means partnering with community or hiring new staff to fill gaps in our existing expertise. One great example of this is our community resource specialist, who we contract with the Downtown Emergency Service Center in order to provide social service referrals directly on site. One of the challenges of working in an urban library environment is that we oftentimes see many, many patrons who are facing social issues, and they come to our desk and ask our library staff for assistance. And our library staff are, as some of you may have heard me say, the most painfully polite profession that there ever is. And what you have is that our staff is trying to help them with the resources that we have on hand. One of the things that we did in getting a community resource specialist on board is that we have someone who actually works in the community in these social service agencies to help us address some of the issues coming forward so we can direct our patrons directly to them. In several cases, reallocating your dollars also to meet changing needs and priorities can be more effective than trying to do more. This was the case with our mobile services division, which took a deep look at our bookmobile's community impact and determined that we could be doing a better job to serve those most in need. So what we did was our bookmobile service actually looked at our service points and stop points and analyzed them against the needs of the community and recognized that there were some communities that we were not serving that were in great need. We chose a path of working with these agencies to discontinue the service, but also to add the new stops that we thought would better serve some of the communities in our city. And those agencies were disappointed to lose service. All of our community partners who were impacted by the shift were understanding of our need to bring services to those most in need. Our bookmobile preschool stops are now primarily at low-income childcare centers and public preschools that serve low-income families, immigrant and refugee families, and disabled children. When we can do so smartly, we will sometimes find money to hire consultants to ensure our offerings and practices are inclusive, equitable, efficient, and impactful. We will actually hire facilitators to review some of the work that we're doing to make sure that it's not biased by our opinion in what we're doing. In our maintenance budget, we can look for money to provide more seating and meeting space solutions for patrons who rely on our physical spaces to connect with others or to simply stay out of the elements. Training. We can use our training dollars to help staff learn de-escalation tactics, to hold trauma-informed interactions, to understand implicit bias, and to serve our transgender patrons with understanding and respect, and more. We're currently working on developing a bystander training for staff who witness harassment in our spaces. With regard to technology, we can invest in new technology and collection materials that meet the changing needs of the community, whether that be borrowable Wi-Fi hotspots, in-building device lending, or just reliable high-speed Wi-Fi in each of our buildings, and that's in addition to the computers that we have available for the public. We also looked at pilot projects. Before seeking full funding for a programming idea, it is worth setting aside money for yourself to experiment. We recently expanded our Fresh Start pilot program. And for those of you who may not know, Fresh Start is an opportunity where we give children or teens with large fines on their accounts an opportunity to have their fines removed and get a fresh start on using the library. It gives them a one-time amnesty to give them opportunities to use the library, as I was just saying. But in order to pilot that program, we actually worked with our foundation. We needed to show them how this approach would make a lasting impact in our community. So our staff worked on a pilot project to offer this service to the public. And after a few months of a successful pilot, it was an easy case to make, and we've expanded the program to help over 700 kids so far this year. That project also speaks to opportunities available to us through the strong friends and foundation groups that support us. It's important that we bring those groups along with us on this journey, not just as sources of funding, but as sources of community support. Friends and foundation groups are another avenue to develop deeper community understanding of the issues we face, and they can build support for the creative problem solving we are doing. So right there, we have three groups advocating on our behalf. We have the board of trustees, we have our foundation board, and we also have our Friends Board. So all of them are helping us advocate on behalf and helping tell our stories around the social issues that we're facing in our libraries. One of the other items that appeared in the business model, which is how we look at the institution ourselves to build a better strategic direction, is strategic communications. We use strategic communications to ensure a consistent approach through our strategic communications plan, which helps tell our institutional story to the public. As a library with 700 employees, we have available to us 700 spokespeople who can tell the public about the good works of the library and some of the challenges that we face. So we want to be sure that our staff is informed and everyone's on the same page. We are just getting ready to roll out this strategic communications plan, which you see in front of you, which is called the strategic architecture, and it speaks to several different principles and how to use the messages that go with them. We just recently overhauled this document to emphasize our role in providing educational opportunities to all, our commitment to equity, our innovative practices, and our success in providing a good return on investment for residents of the city of Seattle. We'll start rolling this out. We just did a presentation to our board, and we'll start moving that through the other agencies that support us. With shared messaging, we can help everyone, including our mayor, our council, and the public at large, understand how we support the city well beyond the programs and collections we offer. It is absolutely essential that our stakeholders understand the broad and critical role we play in our society. And lastly, our policies and procedures. And in fairness, some of you might think we should have started with that, but I think this is an easy one for all libraries. That's why we put it at the last, something that all of us can do. Lastly, regular reviews of our policies and procedures allow us to identify places where we may be creating unnecessary barriers for patrons or where we are hampering our staff's ability to use their best judgment in a situation. I shared with you the instance of how our staff readily stepped up to address the restroom issue during the Women's March. But I wanted to share with you another experience that we had last year that unfortunately was another restroom challenge, but again, it shows how our policies can be adapted to work on that. Last year, we had an incident where one of our staff was following our policies exactly as they should, but it revealed a blind spot in our policies around restroom access. The patron was a transgender, disabled, and in need of a restroom, but our current policies precluded them from being able to use their preferred restroom, which was located in our children's area. Our children's areas being the only spaces that had single-user restrooms here at Central. With leadership, our board of trustees, staff, and community at the table, we were able to find a solution to help ensure this doesn't happen to another transgender patron at one of our libraries. Recognizing that safe and welcoming restroom access is a challenge for transgender individuals all over the world, we implemented a restroom policy that makes our values on the matter clear, that all individuals should have safe and welcoming access to the restroom of their choosing. The policy change has resulted in more welcoming restroom access for all our patrons. Similarly, we will take another look this fall at the impacts of our rules of conduct to find ways we can limit any disproportionate impacts they may have. And we will do so, sorry, I just lost my place. To understand, let me just step back a minute. We will do this, I turned the wrong page. So I will just go with the flow and make that one work, and I'll skip to the next section, and hopefully you'll have a question about that and I can talk about it. And then as I'm wrapping up, I've talked about the ways that we are thinking about being a socially conscious library at the Seattle Public Library and the ways we are responding. So I wanted to finish up and just show you that it's not just libraries are having some of these world case issues around social consciousness. We have just a list right here of some of the things that we've been tracking either through ALA as an organization, through the Seattle Public Library, or I'm a football fan, just some of the things you notice as you watch television. Some of the real world class studies include hate groups in meeting spaces. I think we've all heard the issue of football players kneeling during the national anthem. We all are at some point will experience opioid overdoses in our libraries. A year ago, we were dealing with the controversial statues and monuments in public spaces. All libraries at some times are tested about intellectual freedom. And I think we're all having to recognize that libraries are not necessarily the neutral spaces that we've espoused over the years, or at least our definition of neutrality is sliding a bit. So these are some of the types of issues that show up in our libraries, but also some of the societal issues that occur across the country. And so how organizations, how agencies choose to address those issues is something that's going to become something for everyone to consider. And that's what makes thinking about social consciousness a great thing for our libraries. With that, I'm going to pause or at least stop here because I've reached the end of my presentation, but I'm happy to take any questions that you might have. And with that, Nono, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a really interesting presentation. Um, no questions have been typed in yet, but let's pause and see if anyone has anything that they would like to ask. But I actually had something I would love it if you spoke to, because it's something I find like just a really marvelous program that Seattle Public Library has, which you check out Wi-Fi hotspots. But one of the things that I have read about in the paper is that you work directly with homeless camps to check out hotspots to homeless camps, which provides access not just to the individual, but to the entire camp. And I wonder if you might tell the audience here about that, because I think it's a really wonderful program that Seattle Public Library does.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And right before I do that, just because I don't want to forget it, I am putting the thank you page up because I really am appreciative of everyone tuning in this morning, but I also did it so that you can have access to my email address in case you wanted to send some questions. So yes, Nono, we have hotspots available for loan to our general public that you check out just like you would a regular library book. But we also have taken a number of those uh, Wi-Fi hotspots and made them available to our homeless encampments that are occurring here in the city. So we have teams that go out into the homeless encampments and traditionally loan them, as you might expect, giving them to patrons who have library cards there, but for whatever reason may not be able to make it into the library. The hotspots loan for 3 weeks, just like a book. They can check it in. check it out, and they can keep it, and it gives access to 15 people to use it. So some of their neighbors in the encampments can certainly use them while they're there. But one new feature that we just added recently is that we've also gone to the encampments and used the Wi-Fi hotspots and install them in the encampments such that they are available and to anyone who comes into the space, and not necessarily to be checked out. But if you're in that space and can pick up the signal, it allows you to use it. So it's not checked out to anyone in particular, but it's checked out to the encampment itself. And we set up several of those in the spaces so that they can be used. So again, that gets at how we're trying to carry the Wi-Fi hotspots out into the community and provide access to those who can't necessarily get in, or in some instances who may not feel as welcome coming into some of our physical spaces.
Thank you. We had a question come in from Janice, who says, what are your policies and practices on large amounts of personal belongings in the library?
So that is an issue that we do face, and I will set a little bit of context because I try to put some of the things in context when I'm talking with staff and just going out in the community to talk about that. First of all, Janice, if you reach out to me, I can get you the actual policy. I don't know the name of it exactly, but I can do that. But we do have size limits on what a person can bring into the library. They are the average size materials or goods that they must bring. Um, and there is a restriction on it. And our staff sometimes have to enforce that rule when people bring in belongings a little bit larger than what we requested, or a few more items than we received. But just as an aside, one of the things that I try to keep in mind when we're talking about patrons who have belongings coming in with them is that if you put yourself in the shoes of our homeless patrons, think about this. If you spent the entire night, and you probably possibly experience this in your own communities because we see it when we open each morning, but if you spent the entire night wandering the streets because you were unable to secure housing in the mission, and then the next morning you're waiting for the library to open so that you can use our facilities, um, that's two things that I want you to think about. And then the third thing is think about the belongings that that person has with them. If you've been up all night and if you're waiting to get in the library the next morning, just imagine what it is like to keep up with those belongings that whole day. I carry a book bag to work, and the first thing I do when I get in my office is I put that book bag down. And truthfully, I don't pick it up again until 5 p.m. when I leave at the end of the day. I go home and I throw the book bag down. I don't pick it up again unless I'm doing some work or picking it up the next morning to leave for the office. Just think what it's like to have had to maintain and carry and be mindful of your belongings the entire day and trying to manage that as you move through the city. It's just one of those things that we need to be sensitive about when we see the patrons coming into the libraries with their belongings. But yes, Janice, in response to your question, we do have a policy and I will have to find it. But if you send me an email, I will certainly pull it and send it to you.
All right, I'm scrolling through. I want to get to the next question. Sorry, my screen got kind of minimized. Let's see. All right, so from Tamara says, as someone in a smaller, sorry, my thing is not, computer is not cooperating. As someone in a smaller rural setting, not yet experiencing all the challenges of larger cities, but knowing they are all on their way, what one or two things would you recommend as best for us to focus on and address proactively? Oh, that's a great question.
It is a great question. And if I were in Tamara's shoes, and I know one Tamara in Washington State, so hey, Tamara, if that is you, um, there are two things that I would do if I were starting over and had not yet witnessed or experienced some of the challenges or the social issues that are facing some of the other libraries. I would first at least be mindful of what is occurring in the city itself. Just go by the mayor's office, some of the city departments to see what they're talking about, council, some of the issues that they see coming, and then do two. So that's one thing. So I'm sort of giving you a three-step. process. So that would be one thing. The second thing I would do is I would start talking with staff about some of the issues that we need to be mindful of so that we're all on the same page about being socially conscious and being respectful of it. The thing that you don't want to have to do is explain why you're doing something after you have to face it. So if everyone can get on board with that, that would be great. And then the third thing is just start looking at the policies that are impacted by whatever your mayor or council shared with you. If they said, you know, we're seeing an increase in homeless students in our elementary schools, or if they're seeing more homeless coming into the library, into the city. Those are the policies that you might want to look at first, just to be sure that they're welcoming. I'd also say look and see if you have a welcome policy. That I'm giving you more answers than you asked for, Tamara. My apologies. But that would be another thing that I would do, is look at your welcoming statement and see just what it says and see if it's as welcoming as you need it to be. We're currently in the process of rewriting our, well, we didn't have a welcoming statement. So we're in the process of writing a welcoming statement. And that's one of the things that I wish we really had right off the bat. So that was about 4 things. My apologies.
Now we have another question from Alicia. She says, I want to preface this question by saying that I love your social justice and inclusion initiatives. As someone in a very conservative community, my question is, how do you balance the needs of your very conservative patrons to make sure their needs are met and they feel welcome? How do you respond to their concerns when they complain about being offended by initiative or programs that you run?
You know, if I am good at this, I'm going to go back to our architecture screen. Hopefully that's showing for everyone. And I certainly understand the question, Alicia, because we see it oftentimes too. There are people who choose, and I don't know whether they are more conservative or their idea of what a library should be is at play. But we certainly have people who express some of those same concerns that Alicia has indicated. And what we try to do is first make sure that everyone understands that the library is open to everyone. And if you look at our architecture, you'll see that on the differentiators, this is one of the things that makes libraries very cool and such a democratic institution. Everyone is welcome. And so we really try to help them understand that. We try to help them understand that we provide equity across the city. It's we work with education, and education is loosely grouped into, for me anyway, is educational, informational, and recreational needs. All of those needs fall under education for me, and helping people understand that we're meeting that need for that particular person who may not necessarily fit their idea of who should be using the libraries. You really speak to that. And then you also make sure that your board and your trustees and your foundation and friends are all speaking, and the staff as well, are speaking the same language, because you really want them to understand what the libraries do as an equalizer to access to information.
That is great. That's the last of the questions that's come in so far. If anyone else has another question for Marcellus, please put it in the chat box. This is such great information, Marcellus, and I know the excellent work you guys are doing in Seattle. It's challenging, but you really, I so admire the way you address the needs of all of your patrons.
Thank you. It is challenging, and I will admit we don't get it right the first time, but one of the things that I always say is that we're a learning institution, not just in how to operate, but also how to be a good neighbor to our city and our residents. And so anytime that we can learn from what appears to be a mistake, we will certainly try to step up and correct that.
I think that's an excellent attitude. I don't see any more questions, so I would like to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to share this information with everyone. We've had the webinar has been very well attended, and I know that there are a lot of people who will be watching the recording afterwards. And thank you everyone for coming. I hope this information will help you in your own library. And the recording, we will process the recording and get it online today, and anyone who registered for the session should get a link to the recording.
And I wanted to put out a reminder for the survey.
Oh yes, this afterwards when you close down your window, that survey that pops up, if you can take a few minutes. We're ending a few minutes early, so maybe you can squeeze that into your day. It shouldn't take long. And it's for our IMLS funding. If you're in Washington State, you're all benefiting from our IMLS funding, so it helps you out too. So thank you very much,
And I
everyone.
just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for joining in. It was my pleasure.